not traveling. So we'll see. But I guess we do have a quorum.
Okay. I just want to make sure we had a quorum to start. Okay. So 6:01, I will start. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Library Trustees meeting of February 9th, 2021. The time is 6:01 p.m. I will invite Jinder to call roll.
All right, Trustee Duke Hughes. Trustee Hahn.
Present. Here.
Trustee Lentini.
Here.
Trustee Ross. Chair Cortez.
Here. Thanks, Jinder. I will also invite Jinder to explain how the public can participate in this evening's agenda.
All right, good evening, everyone. Viewers are welcome to provide public comment online through Zoom or by telephone at 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 95880220937#. If you are watching the meeting on Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please select the raise hand feature either on the bottom of your screen or through the participants icon. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period. When it is your turn to speak, you will have, you will be notified that the host is inviting you to participate. You will need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Once you are unmuted, you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments.
Thank you, Jinder. Are there any amendments to this evening's agenda? I don't see anyone. Okay, so let's go to minutes, which are to item number 1 to approve regular meeting minutes of January 12th, 2021. Are there any questions from trustees? I don't see any. I will open up to the public if we have anyone, Jinder.
No, we don't.
Okay. So I will close for public comment. And staff, I don't know if you had anything to add or we're good to go to approve the minutes. I don't see anything from Henry or Susan. Okay. So Jinder, I will ask that you, well, we need someone to request a motion to approve the minutes and someone to second.
I request a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second.
So I'll invite Jinder to call roll.
All right, Trustee Duke Hughes. Trustee Hahn.
Yes.
Trustee Lentini.
Aye.
Trustee Ross. Chair Cortez.
Aye.
And since Trustee Duke Hughes is here, I'll go ahead and say her name. Trustee Duke Hughes.
This is the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, approved. Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so item number 2, a presentation by Supervising Librarian Jamie. I don't want to even try and say your last name, even though I've known you for years, on Marin County Emergency Rental Assistance for COVID-19. So Jamie, take it away.
Yeah, hello, everyone. It's nice to meet those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before. My last name is pronounced Poor, yay, if that helps. It's all the tricks to make it easier. I am the supervising librarian in charge of collections and circulation for San Rafael. And yes, I'm here to talk to you tonight about a project that I have actually been working on with Marin County, which is for their rental assistance program. So give me just a second to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so In mid-December 2020, the city of San Rafael was actually approached by Marin County to inquire if there were any city staff that were available to help process applications of individuals who are looking for rental assistance. I agreed to help with this project, along with a fellow library employee named Luz Diaz, who is currently a college student actually, but she is fully bilingual in Spanish and English, as well as other city staff, including staff from the city manager's office, as well as digital services and open government departments. Through fall 2020, over $3 million was actually distributed countywide. In December, $2.8 million was additionally promised from the Marin Community Foundation, with an estimated $7.75 million promised by early February this month as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which was passed by Congress in late December. Funding for this is mostly distributed for current and past rent, but could also include help covering utilities and any other housing expenses. For individuals looking for this assistance, they would need to call 415-473-2223 to get on the list for a call back. Call center staff, like myself, ask applicants a number of screening questions and go over the documentation needed to provide assistance. Also, it's important to note that citizenship status is not a question, and indeed, many applicants are reassured that we do not talk to immigration or ICE. Spanish is the most spoken language, with English and Vietnamese languages being the next most popular. This is a lot of information, I understand, but all of this is to say that the program actually began by Marin County back in March 2020 in partnership with the Marin Community Foundation to keep people housed during the pandemic. That's really the most important message here. Again, over $3 million was distributed from March through December 2020. And in December, the Marin County Board of Supervisors and Marin Community Foundation dedicated an additional $2.8 million. And then the $7.75 million came in as part of an act passed by Congress in late December. Alongside of this, of course, many of you probably know that the Marin County Supervisors also recognized from the beginning the need for an eviction moratorium with something that was eventually passed on the state level. And again, all of this is to say that keeping people housed during the pandemic is the main goal. So what is the process like? Call center staff is comprised of disaster service workers like myself from the city of San Rafael, along with people from other departments from the County of Marin. Potential applicants are asked various questions to assess their eligibility for financial assistance. They are asked to provide proof of residency and income, and as well as photo ID. Typically, the proof of income would be something like a pay stub, an EDD statement, or a bank statement. For individuals that might not have any of those, it could also be copies of receipts from money orders or really any kind of paperwork that they have. And typical proof of residency is a copy of a lease, but if that is not available, sometimes a written statement from a landlord or even just proof that they're getting mail at that address would be sufficient. And anyone needing help but not possessing paperwork can work with us to hopefully provide some other substitute of information. So again, what does this actually look like in the process? Marin County has a call log that is updated daily. When people call the 415-473, it should be 2223. They get added to a callback spreadsheet. You can also find this number on the Marin County website. We call the interested parties back in the order in which they got on that first call log. And translation services are not only available, but regularly used. Again, because Spanish is the most spoken language. I myself do not speak Spanish, and so we use a translation service for every phone call that it's needed. Those screening questions are covered between staff and the client. We also follow up and send a confirmation of the documentation needed. There are some changes actually coming to this step. This is how it's been working for the last couple months. but with the new influx of money as approved by Congress, the questionnaire and documentation needed are actually going to be something that eventually applicants will be able to complete on their own, at least the basics, with staff like myself doing more of a final check that everything has been completed. Once all of the questions are answered and documentation is provided, we, the staff, flag the application as complete and present the application as final for a review by a community-based organization referred to as a CBO. And just a few examples, there's actually, I think, 8 organizations, but some of the ones that I've seen that are distributing funds perhaps the fastest include Community Action Marin, Canal Alliance, St. Vincent de Paul, Ritter Center, and like I said, a handful of others. And then just some brief stats. I actually got all of these statistics yesterday, so you can see how many open phone calls we have, 1,560 as of yesterday afternoon. Of those, 517 have been moved to the wait list. And then you can also see how much money has been distributed thus far. It may not look very impressive, but it is very time intensive for each of these phone calls. If I'm able to speak to someone who speaks English, so I can speak their native language, a typical phone call would last maybe 20 to 30 minutes. Of course, the minute that I need to use a translator, because each statement has to be translated back and forth, that time at least doubles and obviously sometimes triples with the amount of information and questions that we have to follow up with. And then the follow-up documentation and gathering all of the documents from the people can take an additional anywhere from 20 minutes to up to 2 hours of my time. And I'm only one person that's doing this work. So as you can imagine, it's very time intensive. It's also, it can be emotionally impactful because people are telling you all of the circumstances that have led them to financially needing rental assistance. And so I just want to applaud the other staff, particularly Luz Diaz, who is not only balancing a full college load, but also trying to work full time because she feels very strongly about this project. So again, you have some numbers in front of you, and yeah, it's a very worthwhile project. With that, are there any questions that I could answer for anyone?
I had a couple. Oh, sorry. Should I go?
So, yeah, go ahead. I was just officially inviting questions from trustees.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a couple questions. So, do you know, okay, I guess one question is, if someone receives a grant at one point in time, can they come back and request more?
They can. Yeah,
Okay.
there's no, depending on the circumstances, there may, well, first off, let me say that I am not an expert on this program, right? I don't work for Marin County Housing or anything else. So my understanding is that yes, if they've gotten assistance in the past, that does not disqualify them from getting assistance in the future. That said, I don't know all of the ins and outs of behind the scenes. So I know that if someone had received assistance up until December with the first round of money that was being distributed, but I still go through the same intake process with them. It's just possible that they don't need to send the documentation if they've already gotten assistance. But I don't know how much of a guarantee that is. So that's really up to each community-based organization to really go through the screening and try to determine that.
And these are grants, so they don't have to pay anything back, right? There's like no strings.
Correct.
Once they get the grant, it's theirs. They can use it to pay their rent and stuff. And then the numbers of grants awarded, is it fair to say that that represents the number of households that have been assisted by this program? So if there's 265 grants awarded, is that 265 individual households that have been helped?
Sometimes it's households. Frankly, sometimes it's a subtenant and a master tenant. So particularly in the canal, it's not unusual for people to rent out a room or for there to be multiple families. And so Cheryl, if you and I were tenants together and you needed assistance and so did I, then
I
that would
see.
probably count as twice. So
Gotcha.
it's not a blanket statement. I do know Jamie actually asked if I could go back to the screen. Sorry, just give me a minute with the summary. So let me get back there to this. So yes, does that answer enough
Yeah,
of your question?
no, thank you. No, I was just curious about some of those points. No, thanks so much. This is really interesting. I'm glad
Of
that
course.
this program exists.
Me too. Were there any other questions?
So Jamie, well, on behalf of my employer, the Marin Community Foundation, thank you for doing this firsthand work. Can you actually go back to the first page, not this one? I think it was your summary page I wanted to see. Of course, now I don't know how to get you to a big screen again. There we go. And maybe you said this, but how many people are working? So is it just you two from the library, and how many people are working on this from the county overall? Do you know?
There's probably, I don't know how many people are doing it full time. I will say we had some staff who couldn't commit to doing it full time. So on the city side, so they're doing maybe half of their time on it, give or take. From what I could tell from the county, it looked like there were at least 20 to 30 individuals. But again, I don't know how many of them, like I don't know how many hours each individual staff person is able to dedicate. I am dedicating the vast majority of my time to this, but of course, as a supervisor, I still have some supervisory duties that I need to complete as well. And I just have to say, I think Henry and Susan have both been really great about helping me to balance my time, because this is such an important project and it's so vital and needed by the community. But that said, I still work for the library and for the city. And so it's just trying to find that balance.
And I just wanted to clarify that Jamie is the manager of the city's staff that are a part of this program. And she shifted her furlough holiday time to be able to do this over the 2-week furlough that the library and rec were closed. So she's been very dedicated to this cause, and I'd like to recognize her contribution in that way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Yeah, and I'm not, I'm the manager of it, but it's really like I'm just making sure that city staff have all of the resources that they need, and then helping to be the liaison between the city and the county on this project for staffing or just kind of whatever's needed. Any other questions, or I'll stop sharing if not.
You can stop sharing, feel free, but thank you, Jamie. Any other questions? It's really great to hear. And I'm sure I speak for all of us when we say, thanks for doing your regular duties and beyond for all of us, all of our neighbors in the community. So thanks, Jamie.
Yeah,
Jamie Poirier. Did I get it? Poirier?
Yes, you did.
Okay,
Yes,
all right. I won't
great.
forget it now. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a second. I am supposed to ask if there are any public comments, Jinder.
No, not at this time.
No public comments. Okay, Jamie, thank you then.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so item number 3 would be public comment as well, but unless someone came in the last second, I will assume that
No.
there's no public comment. Okay. Matters before the Board of Trustees. Item number 4, a review of fiscal year 2020 to 2021 second quarter library budget report. Henry, I assume I'll pass that on to you.
Thank you, Chair Cortez. I'm Henry Bankhead, Assistant Library and Recreation Director / City Librarian, and I will be talking about the fiscal year 2021 second quarter budget report. In lieu of a presentation, I'm going to bring up the spreadsheet that we, as part of the packet for this meeting, and I'm pretty confident you'll be able to kind of see it pretty well, though it's a little bit difficult sometimes. So I'm going to share my screen. Oops, second. Try again. Here we go. Okay. How does that look? A little bigger? Okay. Okay.
Good.
All right. So the year is half over, 50%, and we're still playing catch up from the shutdown and the attendant effects. So the overall activity is 46% expended, which you'll see in these green columns represent this fiscal year. The purple columns are from last fiscal year by comparison. So we're kind of doing better than we were last fiscal year because that also was part of the shutdown and we weren't able to spend money. So we're still catching up. General fund expenditures are at 51%. No, general fund expenditures, yeah, ended at 51%. And that's kind of due to the fact that MarinNet as a whole and our contract services are always overspent because we pay that in a lump sum at the beginning of the year. The parcel tax generally is 35% behind our spending. And that largely has to do with the fact that we've had fewer staff while we were open fewer hours. We have some frozen positions and unfunded positions. So we're still trying to kind of operate at a limited capacity. So that limits our ability to spend money. For those of you that are new to our budget, you'll see halfway down on the left side, contract services is one of our largest budget items in the general fund. I mentioned this before. And that's everything we pay to MarinNet, which is the consortial office for the integrated library system, for ebooks and databases, and for our broadband wireless. And that also includes our other contractual services like the janitorial, the air conditioning. So that is always overspent because we pay that in a lump sum yearly.
Henry, I'm going to interrupt you. Eric wanted to ask in the chat. I think he asked, what is your fiscal year period?
Oh, good. Sorry. Our fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th. So the quarter ended July, August, September, October, November, December. So this is through the end of December, and the end of the fiscal year will be June 30th of 2021. So it's always spanning, it's not calendar year, but it's yeah, July 1st is the beginning. Does that answer your question, Eric?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why is the budget, did you re-budget? Is that why 2021 is lower than 2020? Did you do a re-budgeting process?
Very good question. We have 7 unfilled positions. 3 of them were frozen and removed from the budget. So top line, we're behind like 800,000 across the top. I think that you'll see the difference between and some of those positions were in measure. Yeah. So those were removed from the budget.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. We have 4 positions that are unfilled that are still in the budget, both in measure general fund and in measure D. And so as the year proceeds, and if things happen like we hope they will, and things get better and we reopen, we'll be looking at making the case for refilling those positions. But yeah, the budget strategy, and I think I covered this when we first met after the shutdown. The city's budget response to the lack of revenue was to freeze open positions. We're doing a furlough of 5% cut for all non-safety staff, and there were incentivized retirements.
What about, did hourly people time get cut, so they also didn't get paid during this as well? Only
Yes, all like temporary staff were not working during the shutdown, and we brought back a limited number of those staff that on a very kind of conservative basis as needed. We're starting to ramp up more temporary staff, which is usually our pages and people that would maybe work for another library system and get extra hours with us, and we use them to fill in on the weekends or nights in order, because we're like a 7-day operation. But we are underspent with our extra hire funds in Measure D. You'll see it's the extra hire line there. We're 32%. So those people, we had all of our regular hire people working remotely, but unfortunately, we couldn't employ our temporary staff during the absolute shutdown. Yes. So other things of note, we're way overspent in audio visual. You'll see like a third way down on the left, we're 115%, because we had back ordered stuff because we stopped receiving items before the end of last fiscal year. So it all came in a big chunk at the beginning of this fiscal year. But we're planning to move money from our periodicals account. We have canceled all our periodical subscriptions for the duration from like a sort of because people can't really get in to touch those things. We don't really circulate them very highly, and it was a way to kind of save some money, and we're going to shift that over to audio visual.
So every one of these line items is an account. So so everything has to move from one account to the next. It's not like, oh, we're under here, it's okay. You literally have to move the money.
We are not, our finance manager is not in favor of bottom line budgets, but we have some ability to move money around specific by the mechanism of a mid-year budget transfer.
Got it.
Did I see some questions in the chat? No? Okay.
Henry, can you do me a favor? I'm sorry. Does the screen freeze from the left? Can we see the full right side of the combination of both the general fund and the parcel?
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, but it won't freeze.
Freeze.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that's better.
Also, we're very much on books.
Yep.
Generally, we had been trying to spend on Measure D during the first part of the shutdown and subsequent reopening with curbside. But now we're going to move and shift to spending more of our general fund, which we have only 1% expended in books. So I regard the collection budget as the core of our expenditures. So we're going to work very hard to get all of that money spent by the end of the fiscal year. And it may be possible for us to use some of that money for some of our ebook collection, as that has skyrocketed since the shutdown. Also, the new library conceptual design project, we're going to use about $80,000 from the Measure D. You'll see at the bottom we have a capital set aside, which is pretty healthy amount, and we're going to be using part of that. The capital set aside is at 353. 335, and part of that to fund the new conceptual design for the library and community center building in Albert Park, which we'll talk about later.
So the measure C set aside, not measure D set aside.
Yes, in measure C. It was not in measure D, correct. The parcel tax. So
For
that
others, oh, go ahead, finish. Sorry.
those are the highlights, and I will entertain additional questions if you have them.
Calling for any questions from any other trustees?
Hi, sorry, I dropped for a second. I may have not seen was frozen there. Are you asking for comment from the trustees?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I know you mentioned you're moving some of the funds around. Is there are you guys going to be looking overall at the budget? Because I get that it looks like you're doing fairly well even with the revamped budget for 2021, fiscal year 2021. Like, I mean, I can look at it and you're showing 90% of your expenses on the contract services, which you mentioned. I think you mentioned you kind of prepay a lot of that stuff. So, and that's the huge line item. So even though you're at 51% of the budget halfway through the year, it seems like there's definitely a lot of funds that you aren't going to use or that you haven't used to this point. So are you guys going to just kind of look at a complete overhaul, but of how you can spend the money? I know you mentioned, I think I missed this part, but basically the finance manager is not in favor of kind of the overall budget and how you guys distribute it, but they kind of like keeping it in those buckets. But is there an opportunity to kind of look at the whole overall picture? Because it looks like you're going to be pretty fine in terms of the budget and how you're tracking.
So I think the greatest challenges for this budget year are due to the COVID shutdown and moving to a curbside model, which have like severely restricted our ability to spend money. I believe it's sort of a big anomaly in the sort of overall budget cycles, to date. The most relevant thing we're going to look at internally is combining multiple budget lines that had been separated out. So the actual budget looks very different than this. We had a different budget for books for adults, for children's, for pickleweed. We had a different budget for technical services and administration. And combining like with like on the back end is going to make our budgeting much simpler. As far as the overall, I think the biggest change might be looking to putting more towards electronic books rather than just books. And I think most significantly, the fact that we've had 7 open positions due to a lot of internal realignments that happened before the COVID shutdown. For example, we hired a new supervisor and their position is still open. We added a librarian dedicated to pickleweed, which hadn't been there, a full-time librarian, a librarian dedicated to the mall. A lot of that we weren't able to finish that process of realigning staffing. And now that we have 7 open positions, we may be looking further at what kind of efficiencies, combining maybe 2 half-time positions might be a possibility. So it'll probably be in the staffing area if we do any kind of major realignments.
Okay. I guess I was just curious because it looks, I mean, without seeing how that projects to the end of the year, just looking at the big line items and a lot of the other areas where a lot of funds, just not a lot, but a lot of the funds haven't been spent. Just curious to see how it's projecting out.
Well, for example, when we order books, it takes like 3 months to spend the money sometimes, maybe a little less. We could spend all of that book money on ebooks in like a day. So I think I'm pretty confident, though we're behind the ball right now in terms of spending in some major categories, that we'll be able to catch up pretty readily because of our ability to kind of actually make expenditures so that we don't have to wait. Like typically we'll order books before they're published, and then we have to wait for them to come in. And the cycle of that is that we want to get a book title that's been announced in the catalog and people placing hold on it, like 6 months or greater beyond when it's actually going to be received, so that people can like put it on their list. So we have like some flexibility now in being able to spend on electronic materials that we might not have had in the previous years, which will aid us. But it's going to be somewhat of a challenge, but I don't think it'll lead to really major realignments of our budget categories.
Henry, I know we're in a pandemic year, so things are very different, but maybe for the new members, I mean, most people are new to, besides Rob and myself, new to seeing these budgets over and every quarter. And so I would just say that usually it's very prudent system. There has not been issues before. Maybe you just want to give some little historical background, you know, about how it has been previous years, because majority of the group is new to.
Yeah, in previous years, we would want to be much more like we would never have 1% of books expended in the general fund. That's kind of an artifact of that we were not spending any general fund money beyond regular hire staffing, and we were spending everything in Measure D. We would typically have spent much more in travel and conference. We slashed that budget at the beginning of this budget year because we knew we weren't going to be traveling. We're trying to spend more in training and instruction. So in Measure D, you'll see that 70% expended. There's not a lot of individual large amounts being spent, but there's tons of online training that we're sending people to. So that is reflected there. The general fixed costs seem to be rising every year, like the cost of utilities, the air conditioner, the HVAC, the janitorial is going up a little bit. We have not had to pay for security, and we actually cut that in the current budget. We may have to revisit that as something that we would look at again, as maybe when we are letting people into the building, we may or may not anticipate having people not wanting to leave. We're not sure how that's going to go. And then again, with the audio visual materials, we're supplementing that budget with the ability to sort of eliminate periodicals altogether. So we had spent some money on periodicals at the beginning of the fiscal year before we actually canceled most of them. And we're hoping to really kind of, reuse that money in a very prudent way, given that we do usually buy a large amount of periodicals. It's 7,000 in one budget and 6,000 in the other that we've been able to eliminate. I remain hopeful that we could actually bring our MarinNet costs down. We pay about 250,000 of that 300 and something thousand directly to MarinNet, and it's an inflated cost based on a sort of cost breakdown that is both. It looks at our amount of circulation, the population of our city, and the number of books in our collection. And none of those actually contribute to the amount of work that the front office has to do for us. So I'll, as a member of the MarinNet board, when we rewrite our JPA, I'll be looking at maybe redoing the cost sharing formula to reflect a more true kind of reflection of the sharing of resources and what that entails. That's all.
Cheryl.
So if you're, like you said, in some of these categories, kind of behind or underspending because of the pandemic and everything, when you get toward the end of the fiscal year, like what happens if there's surplus? Do you like make recommendations of where to spend it down, or does it roll over to the next fiscal budget? What happens if that happens?
Well, our strategy had been just to spend Measure D. Our strategy now is to try to really focus on spending general fund, because that doesn't roll over and Measure D does roll over.
Okay,
So Measure D isn't, it's solely for the library, so it can't be spent for anything else. From a collaborative budget strategy, we would try to avoid just trying to spend money for the sake of it, and actually, you know, if we save some money at the end of the year and it's not for a critical core thing like books, it would not be received as negatively as it would have been in another year where there wasn't a pandemic or a budget shortfall. But we will try to expend all that money, you know, in a reasonable way by the end of the year.
I don't see any other questions. I'm looking.
I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Perfect. Henry, besides the expense that you said for the new library, this concept design, I don't know if the other projects that were early, I guess it wasn't last year, I guess it was 2019. When we did all that community work with Nolan Tam. Was that also out of that capital budget? Is question number one. And question number two, can we start seeing reports on these quarterly as well when you are expending? So when you're expending some of those capital funds?
So previously, two questions. The previous project with Nolan Tam, finance had assigned that cost to the Measure C surplus, but there was some disagreement on the appropriateness of that from the parcel tax board, so it was moved to the set aside from the parcel tax. We anticipate Nolan Tam will invoice us on a regular basis as they perform work. And that's all going to hit a project account that finance is setting up as we speak. But we should easily be able to kind of show you in the quarterly reports going forward, the next two, as how those funds are, or show those funds being expended.
Great. Thank you so much. Any last questions before we move on?
Just wondering, Henry, on the personnel side that you mentioned, you know, you have open positions. Obviously, you've had to pivot to a completely different service model, at which you were exemplary on that, because not every library pivoted as quickly as you did to curbside. And so that's fantastic. And I wonder if that has generated different in kind personnel, you know, needs that fund could be used toward, or those, you know, non-utilized budget funds to, I don't know if, you know, more people on the phone could be needed to, you know, organize curbside pickup, or like, have you thought of any different ways in which, you know, you might need more personnel, but in a different way than you did before the pandemic?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. Generally, the non-personnel and personnel lines, neither the two shall meet. But we have been very kind of cautious about just adding personnel because of the sort of, we didn't want to overburden the number of people in the building at any one time and having to wear masks and social distancing. And but you're right. We could be more innovative possibly in using our temporary budget to add staff who could work. Some libraries had like shifts of people working virtually and people working in person. And the closest we came to that is we had a staff member who for reasons couldn't come in. They were too vulnerable medically to come in. So they worked virtually and did all the chat. So that's a way that we could actually, you know, kind of marry those two. But I like the idea of being more creative in that way. And what I thought you were asking, well, at least what another thing that comes to mind is, as we bring back those positions, we have to decide whether the sort of paraprofessional positions that have more skills, would they actually frontline circulation of materials are what we need, or do we need more of the librarian positions that are creating programs and doing more higher level work? But what's interesting is now our librarians are doing the frontline circulation and the higher level work. So we kind of need both, because everyone's kind of tapped out and been doing their regular job and someone else's job, and kind of some way that we can just provide more people to perform this task, I think will make it like more not easier, but more accomplishable for everyone.
Yeah, I like that. And ultimately, for the benefit of the community and the
Yes.
users, right?
And we do hope to have the library open sometime, which will then even mean more staffing, because though when we're open in normal times, the people check their own books out, but there's just a whole nother level of kind of attention when someone's in the space, and we have to kind of like have a real service desk to kind of address their needs. And we're thinking we'd actually be doing curbside and letting people into the library. So working that all out is going to be another level of kind of complexity. But we're going to try to, and Susan always tells me this, we're not going to try to overcommit. At first, we have to move in like baby steps towards reopening.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Henry. Let me pull up the agenda. So we will move on to item number 5, review of proposed library board of trustees work plan for, I'm sorry. Is there any public comment, Gender? No public comment. Okay. So item number 5, review of proposed library board of trustees work plan for 2021. Henry.
It's me again. So I'm gonna share my screen again, and I have well, it's an Excel sheet that has the dates of all the meetings and what we propose might come up. It's all flexible, but we wanted to give you a sense of how the year may go and ask people to give input for things that might not be there that they would like to see. And as a way of having sort of an organizing principle for what we're likely to see for the coming year. So I'm going to share my screen right now and see, this is a draft. Can everyone see that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. And you'll see January 12th already happened, and we did have an RFID update, and the presentation was booked to action. February 9th is right now, and this is actually what we're talking about. And the presentation was Marin County Emergency Rental Assistance. Other than that, everything else in there is pretty flexible, with the exception of the review of the library budget quarterly reports. We're projecting the next one would come in June and then in September. Though it could be a little earlier. The September report could be in August. It all depends on how good we're at ending the fiscal year. Some of these things may not make sense to you, so feel free to ask, or I can just explain as we go down the list. Which would you prefer?
Do we need to go down the list? I assume that we've probably all seen this because it was in the packet. Can we just take a few minutes, and then if anyone has questions, we'll raise hands?
Cool. So we're going down the list?
No.
No,
Oh,
we're not
okay.
gonna go down.
Question.
No, we're just gonna give a few minutes, and then if anyone, I'll see if anyone's raising their hands to ask any questions. And while I let people review for a little bit, I just want to say I'm excited to see the the May 11th Leadership for Equity and Opportunity report that Jill Harris, I assume, will be giving based on that training that she's attending. So thanks for putting that in there. And always like the summer reading report as well. So great. I'm looking for hands if there's any questions about the work plan.
Is there anything we should be thinking at this point, or any pre-reading, just so that we have time, a little time to ponder on these things? A lot of this I just I've never heard before, Ranganathan or Raspberry Pi. So just wondering if there's any pre-read that we could do, of course, you know, a week before the meeting, but even at this point to get ourselves ahead.
Yes. So the things that come to mind, the March 9th says Book Industry Standards and Communications, BISAC. And that, the idea there is getting rid of the Dewey Decimal System and substituting it for more generally accessible subject headings and kind of getting rid of the bias of Dewey, which kind of is a thing most related to the Anythink libraries in Colorado and Maricopa County. But I think some libraries in our local area have done that. Ranganathan, I thought was interesting. I made these little cards for everyone, if anyone can see that. And his 5 laws of library science is kind of an interesting take on libraries that often people have never heard of, but he has some very simple and direct sort of rules for libraries, which I thought you would enjoy. Raspberry Pi is a computer that allows internet browsing and possibly more. That's a very low cost, and you can make yourself. We have some kits, and we've been experimenting with using them for our OPAC machines, which is just the ones that you use to look things up in the library, and it's a way of both having a hands-on sort of user experience, a hands-on sort of building the technology from the back end, because InFam from Digital Services has helped us with this, but also saving a ton of money and making it much easier to provide computers for people to browse in the library.
Henry, do you, I know you've done this before in other agenda packets, either have provided articles prior or maybe now with the link. I think that might be a great thing, especially for new members. And, you know, I don't know that, but maybe we can just, you know, if your staff or you can just include 1 or 2 articles in relation to those, but in the agenda packet, that would be great.
That'd be great.
I don't necessarily know if we want to go through each line item right now.
Yeah, Little Free Libraries, everyone's probably heard of that. And that would be an interesting one. And so, yeah, some more links and information, totally. And we're also looking for any ideas of things that the board would like to see discussed, or any presentations that you'd like to see.
Well, one of the things that I know we talked about was potentially, because we're talking about getting rid of the fees on late books, about providing a positive, more of a carrot approach to people returning the materials on time and stuff. We talked about that. We never discussed actually there was
Oh, that's good. Incentivizing cooperative borrowing.
Yes, and I remember we mentioned that, and you were all excited about it because there are systems out there that can help do that, and it kind of got lost in COVID.
Pandemic.
COVID, yeah.
You got it.
Okay.
I'm writing this down. Also,
Susan, I see Susan's hand up.
Thank you, Jamie. I just wanted to let you know there's very few items on this work plan that are really timely or sensitive, in that they have to happen pretty much as they're indicated. As you know, the library budget obviously is the #1 item, as well as the end of the year, the selection of the chair and vice chair, et cetera, and the review of the calendar. But having said that, even some of those can move. So for example, in November and December, if the Board of Trustees decided it wanted to go dark because of the holiday period, those are easily can be moved up to November or moved back to December. So it's not a taboo thing. All the rest of these items, unless they're tied to an action item outside of our agency, like with MarinNet, are very flexible in their presentation and when they're presented to you, obviously. So I just wanted you to know that. And this is based on, you know, Henry and his staff's work of kind of coming up with things that they thought were timely or interesting to you. That doesn't mean it's a complete list. And there might be new things that obviously are much more pertinent and timely that need to come in, and, you know, we'll massage it. So I just wanted you to know that.
Thanks for that note again, Susan. Adriana?
Yeah, so thank you for that, because that's a really good point. My eyes went to services to Spanish speaking families, and right now they're really struggling. Many of the essential workers are from the Latino community, and they are struggling on all accounts, both medically, also kids not being able to go to school more than a few hours a week, and where our services as a public library are more important than ever, so that kids don't fall behind on reading. So I wonder if that could be brought up, as well as anything related to supporting, you know, school-age children whose schooling is limited to a few hours a day. Parents still maybe have to work or not, but where I mean, I just hear all the time in my circle how kids have fallen behind on reading, and whether there's anything we can do a little bit more to push to schools. I think schools are overwhelmed with just getting the bare basics, that, you know, they're not really going on the extra mile of, you know, how do we get the kids to continue reading, or like the teacher that tries to explore a little bit with a kid what your favorite genre might be, so it can get you interested in books. So that's where maybe we could have an item on the efforts that you're doing, and, you know, how we can support. But even just bringing up that services to Spanish speaking families up a few months would be useful.
We can certainly do that. Thank you, Adriana.
Thanks for the recommendation, Cheryl.
Yeah, I don't even know if this will make it into the end of the year, but I just thought when we have been, or we are coming out of the pandemic, I just thought maybe could we have an item to just sort of have a retrospective or reflection on kind of lessons learned or experiences during the pandemic, or how it might make you think differently about changing some operational things going forward as a result, or, you know, something like that, like a pandemic retrospective. And you know, again, I think it's going to be play it by ear and see when it makes sense to even have the moment to think about that. But maybe it'll fit into this year if we're lucky.
I think it's a great suggestion, Cheryl. Thank you, Rob.
The other thing that we talked about at one time, and I forgot it, if Susan put the kibosh on this, was talking about the money that's in the endowment, kind of like the bequeathed money, and better able to, you know, optimize it or figure out if, you know, it seems like it's in a bunch of different accounts, and is it really being managed actively for the benefit of the library? And I forgot if Susan said, no, we can't do that, or something like that. Or maybe bring in someone from finance to.
The finance director, I believe we asked, and they said there's stringent laws that dictate how that money's invested, and we couldn't actually do anything differently, though I understand totally what you're saying. Am I correct, Susan?
You're correct. And I absolutely remember Trustee Ross's comment, and Henry checked with our finance director on that. But I think what you wanted to know at the time was a little bit more than that. I think, if I remember correctly, you were curious as to what strategies the city can explore holistically, like regardless of this one specific situation. And we can ask her to come and do a presentation. I know she did one on the budget a while ago, and I know we're going to have another one coming up here, which is us, in regards to the master fee schedule. But I know we're going through the budget process right now, so the finance director is really busy, but I would love for her to come and just explain that to you. Absolutely. So thank you for bringing it up. No, I didn't put the kibosh on it.
Okay. I wasn't
No,
sure.
absolutely not. I did hear you.
Yeah, that wasn't meant to be a negative. It was about that's the way the life works in government in that respect. So
No, it's a really good question. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Henry, when we talked about the funding of the library conceptual design, I thought we were talking about the possibility of even using one of the donations that, if I remember correctly, was earmarked for future planning of a library. So we do have some options on how some of our money's being spent, but you were asking specifically about investments.
right.
And how that money can be invested. So we will follow up, and thank you for reminding us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan.
Great. Any last questions? No. Well, thanks for all the great suggestions, and I'm sure Henry will take them and move them forward.
Can we have
And
a
is
motion?
oh, do we need a motion to
Well, I don't know if there's
Okay.
any public watching that you guys need to get public comment.
I was gonna get there. Yeah, so Jinder, do we have any public
No.
comment? No, thank you. Okay. So it doesn't say we need to, it doesn't say we need a motion. Do we need a motion? It's not on my notes here.
Correct. So
Okay.
what it's asking for is your feedback, but once we've received the feedback, if the work plan, if everyone feels good about it, then the other action would be that the board could make a motion to accept it with the recommendations.
Okay.
And then
Great.
we can take a vote on it, and then that becomes kind of our to-do list.
Great, thanks, Susan. So will a board member set a motion to approve the work plan with the proposed revisions?
Well, we don't necessarily have proposed like dates on proposed revisions yet. Like I know Adriana wanted like the Spanish speak to move up. Like, do we want to take one more month to have a new proposal to come back before we vote on it? Just so we see what the thought process is, or do we want to do that now and stuff? I might, because there's a couple topics and scheduling and things like that. I don't know. It's just.
Well, I think there's a couple ways you can go about it. We can take this back and massage it a little bit and move some items up if that is the feedback that we've received. But a lot of this, even if you adopt it, you're adopting it with the idea that other things may come up that is more pertinent, and some of these items, because they're not time sensitive, they're informational items, could be pushed. They could be brought a month early or pushed back depending on something's really pressing about like the RFID system or something like that, where we really need you guys to weigh in on. So there is some flexibility built into that.
Got it. Okay.
And if we find out a lot of you are going to be gone and the hot topic is one of the items that's listed on the work plan, you can let us know. Hey, there's going to be a whole bunch of us gone. Can you please move that to May when we're going to be here? Because it's really important. And that's completely reasonable.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Susan. Okay, so would anyone like to motion? Rob?
There you go. Okay, I'll motion.
So you're motioning to approve the work plan.
I'm making a motion to accept the 2020-2021 work plan for the library board.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, so board, oh, Jinder,
No,
did I miss something?
I can take
Oh.
roll. Yes.
Oh, yes, thank you. Take roll,
No
please.
Okay, trustee Duque,
Aye.
trustee Hahn,
Aye.
trustee Lentini,
Aye.
trustee Ross,
Aye.
chair Cortez.
Aye. Thanks, Jinder, for keeping me honest. So item 6, other brief reports on any meetings, conferences, and or seminars attended by board members. If so, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, we have none, and I think Cheryl and I did attend the library concept design meeting, which Henry will go over in the next piece. So item 7, other brief program updates or reports on any meetings, conferences, or seminars attended by staff. Henry or Susan?
There are none. I don't know if Henry wants to weigh in on that. Okay.
Henry, you're on mute if you're talking or if you're looking something.
No, but I'm okay, I'm gonna go through all the meetings and then we're gonna talk about the new library update. Yes. So Measure D Parcel Tax Committee has not met this year yet. We're planning to set up that meeting for the first quarter soon. They're only required to meet twice a year, but generally we meet 4, 5, or 6 times. The Friends of Centerville Public Library met a month ago and a day. The major topic of the day is they've decided not to close the store, and they have a new bookstore manager, whose name I forget. Fail share. When I left that meeting early, I hit end and I ended it for everyone, and then but they were all able to get back in. Thank you, Jill H, for helping me out with that. The Library Foundation, I don't think met last month, but we're meeting later in the month. Am I correct, Cheryl? Yes.
Yeah, we're meeting next week.
And so we're, I think, looking forward to discussing how much progress we're making in the new library project. Marin Board had their annual retreat in January. The state librarian Greg Lucas was invited and attended to discuss the concept of universal borrowing, which some of you have heard a report from me on, but to reiterate quickly, in most other counties in the Bay Area, even if you don't live in the jurisdiction, if you have a library card, like if I have one from Berkeley or San Francisco, I can use their ebooks. In Marin, we both limit people from other cities within Marin using our resources, and people out of county that can't use anything. So we're working to change that, so we have the same sort of collaborative sharing in Marin that we have like in Contra Costa, Alameda, San Francisco, Santa Clara County, and beyond, because the state of California is sort of emblematic in that we provide universal borrowing for books. And some libraries like ours has interpreted that to mean only physical books, but it doesn't say physical books, and ebooks are books. So that was a big topic. I think we're making some progress. We also talked about the RFID project, which we're doing. We've decided that the county will be giving the consortium $500,000 to purchase RFID materials, mainly tags, to put in all of our books as part of our RFID project, which we talked about last time. And it was proposed to the board that they have an ongoing equity discussion during every meeting, modeled on the county's equity work. And the board is still thinking about how that would best be accomplished. That I think some of them weren't fully on board with making it kind of an ongoing piece where there would be kind of a topic shared out before and kind of like a dialogue about that issue, rather that it was suggested that each library should share what they're doing on equity rather than having like a kind of group discussion about the topic. So that's an ongoing issue in that we hope to have more clarity on soon. The NorthNet board met the last day, one of the last days of January. That's the consortium we're part of that goes from Marin to the Oregon border and over to the Sierras to the next state over there. I think it's Nevada. And again, we talked about universal borrowing. For example, some libraries like Sacramento, all of their materials are open to anyone, and I think they assume that all of us are like that. So it's just interesting that we're getting more notice for not being like everyone else. Also, another big thing was some libraries have been open during the shutdown. I think Napa and Sacramento have been a lot more open, and libraries that were immediately contiguous to them have been getting a lot of pushback from residents who see the people in the next town library is open, but theirs isn't. So that was an interesting topic. I think Sacramento is a very awesome library system, got a lot of resources, and they're able to do a lot, and maybe other libraries are like more affected during the pandemic. Particularly Benicia hasn't been open. So that was also discussed. So now we're at the new library building update. We had our first meeting of the work group, which includes members of the Library Foundation, this Board of Trustees, the Parks and Rec Commission, the Friends of the Library, one of our city council members, Mary Beth Bushy, and library and city staff, including Susan, myself, Bill Guerin, the Public Works Director, and Paul Jensen, the Director of Community Development. We had a kickoff meeting on February 4th, one of 4 meetings, plus a staff meeting, so 5 total. That's part of a project which is projected to end in June with a presentation to the City Council. It was a great meeting. We had kind of a round to everyone to introduce themselves and say what's important to them about the project. A lot of concerns were raised, both positive and negative, about the site. We talked about, I have the notes up right here. What matters most to you in this project. We talked about the schedule. I put calendar appointments on everyone's schedule from here until the end of the project. Actually, Ginger did that. And then we had a lot of discussion about where the sort of entrance might be, but most of it was about parking. And so you know, I would welcome other attendees to add additional comments, but parking always is kind of a big deal with these kind of buildings, and there's no easy solution. I think Nolan Tam has done or is doing a site walk and looking at all the options is going to be able to present to us some design concepts at the next meeting. But I was very impressed with their use of Zoom to move around squares on a map and give us some ideas about the building being on B Street or not on B Street. And the fact that the venue space is going to produce a ton of sound on weekends and after hours, and how that's driving the neighbors crazy now, that came up also, which I thought this is a very productive process, and I thought we're going in the right direction. What do other people think?
Thanks, Henry. So Cheryl, Susan, and I were all in it. From my perspective, well, Henry, you kind of did all of it. I'm sure Cheryl will tell her parking story, and then Susan can tell her parking side of the story with two different sides of the coin. And Henry, one of the things I would give feedback to you on, and that I had planned to do it in an email, but I'll just do it now, is I appreciate that they asked the group sort of what would you like to see, where would you like to see it open? Where would you like to see parking? But I would love, and I hope that the next one is using their expertise on where the right locations are and why. And I think Susan has an invaluable voice that she added to that, knowing the space inside and out and where noise is coming from, and parking and entrance. I think that's really valuable. I just would really not want to have, I would hope that the next meeting is not as much as what this, the boxes of the stakeholders in the panel, like from the foundation, from the Board of Trustees, et cetera, what we necessarily want. Of course, we want different things, but just the design concept, they're the experts. So what is based on the feedback and what they know about the space, I would love more about their recommendations from there. Cheryl, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you in a sense, because I was trying to sort of really understand sort of what our job was and what the goal of this process is. And, I was sort of struggling with a little bit of discomfort in, who am I to represent? There wasn't representation from people who live in the canal. It was an uneven representation, which is, I know, is kind of how these things go. But it did make me think that if this is really meant to be a rather analytical process, I know they're going to design something, but I don't want our little group. Yes, thank you for asking us our opinions. We all have them. We all have varying degrees of knowledge about the site and its use. But I think that I do also want to see them as professionals gather the information they need from the city to understand the precise plan, the general plan, talk to staff to understand the usage, look at the, past schedules of events that happen in the community center, understand the usage patterns of the library, understand the traffic patterns, the flows, really get the data on, the parking issues. I'm just sort of expecting all of that to happen. So I agree. I appreciate asking our comments, but I think ultimately I want to see them really be solid on all the data behind their suggestions and recommendations that they put forth to us. And, and I have no doubt that we will all react and give them plenty of feedback when we see those things. And then just on the parking thing, it's just so you guys know what we're talking about is I land on the side of, I don't think individually owned cars is the future. And, a library is a multi-generational building. It's going to be there for more than 1 or 2 generations. And while I agree and understand that we do need to have a solution that does not create a short-term problem, whatever short means to you, because this is the reality of today. We all do drive our cars and people come from lots of places to attend these events at the community center. My comment was, I don't want to see some minimal level of parking need drive how the library and community center gets proposed or designed. And I don't want like sort of the tail wagging the dog just about parking. I mean, because for so many years, I will tell you, every single project, doesn't matter what it was, where it was in the city of San Rafael, that was a larger scale project that was proposed, it came before me in design review board, even neighbors just building a house, every single project, parking. Oh my God. And every time it was a problem. Didn't matter if a parking garage was proposed as part of the project, didn't matter if the parking garage that we already have in the city is a block away. It never mattered. It was always a problem. So I tend to, and I admit it, I tend to downplay those concerns to some degree because I don't know, I live here. I've just never experienced the catastrophes that I have heard expressed. Yes, sometimes neighborhoods get overparked. Yes, there's noise. I've lived here since 99, and when there used to be lots of nighttime baseball games that we can hear from our house and we can see the glow in the sky, cars never made it to my neighborhood, but I am aware that these things happen, but it never seemed to be a downside about living in our town. So at any rate, that was a little parking, back and forth that I brought up. And someone else in that group went even farther than me. Who was that?
Someone named Ariel, but I
It was
don't.
Ariel
Yeah,
from
she
Park and
even
Rec.
went way out there with electric cars, driverless cars being, in 5 years, we won't even be driving our own car. I mean, she was just really on that track later on. So, but I'm glad it started. I'm really excited to see, what Nolan Tam, start to bring to the table.
And the ultimate goal that we all said was like, we just want a new library. So we're all working towards that. Susan, go ahead.
The one thing I just wanted to share with our representatives as well as the entire board, you're the first ones to hear it besides Henry and Allison from Nolan Tam. We did hear back from our sister city, who was a group that was behind creating funding the garden that is adjacent to the San Rafael Community Center. If you've ever been to the San Rafael Community Center, there is a large outdoor garden that is accessible through one of the corridors at the community center, as well as the large auditorium that is rented heavily. It's beautiful. And Grupo Lanatesi is the one who did it in 1987. So there's a fountain, there's olive trees, there's lemon trees, there are hand-painted square tiles throughout the area, especially around the fountain. So our concern came up through this process from our architects of, hey, are they married to that location? Does it have to stay? Because you can imagine it sits in the middle of the building. So it's like a donut. And so with adding a library and with all the other concerns that were just addressed, there's only so many options of orienting the building and creating, what it's going to look like. So Henry and I, And Catherine from the rec side met with a small group of their board and went through what the project was. Because at first they said, oh, you're demolishing it? I'm like, no, no, no. It's a conceptual design. We want your feedback. This is kind of what we're looking at. We assumed we couldn't touch it. However, you know what? We want to come to you and find out what you're willing to do. So the feedback that we got as recently as last Friday night was we met with about 30% of the general membership of the sister city. And whereas we'd love it to stay the same and not move, we are completely open to reimagining it where it could be. And here are the elements that are really important to us. The fountain, let me tell you why the olive trees and lemon trees are important to us, and the roses, and the mural, you know, the tile murals. But we're sure that can be relocated and recreated in such a way, and we're open and we'll continue to work with you as you go through this process. But it is not a hard no, and we're not going to say that at this time. So fantastic. I mean, that's incredible. Honestly, wasn't quite sure if that was going to happen, but thrilled. And I think it's really important. This is one more of what you guys all know really well. It is a reminder of how important it is to get groups input and to share the ideas of a project early on so they can feel, and they are, included in the process instead of hearing about a conceptual design and then coming to them at the 12th hour and saying, what do you want to do? And then the brakes go on and everybody's really concerned and really upset. So it went really well. And I told them as we go through the process, I'll let them know, but it's a conceptual design. And only if it becomes the decision of the city council to make this the selected option for the library, will it go on to a second design phase. And when that happens, then we would roll up our sleeves and get their input as to, here are some of the options, what do you think? And who knows, they might be wanting to fund some improvements or something like that as well. But I think one of the key points of the reason why they were on board is their garden is older. And a lot of the wiring, a lot of the irrigation, a lot of the plants and stuff obviously are showing their age and need improvements. And so the idea of recreating a newer version and of what they love about it on the dime of this project is definitely has appeal. So anyway, that's a long part of the story, but I wanted to share that with you. So that's very exciting. So basically, with the exception of the Albert Park Stadium that really needs to stay, and Marin Bocce and Parkside Children's Center, we have a lot of flexibility now in moving that building around to really accommodate the library the best and the location. So I'm excited about that.
Thanks, Susan. Were there any questions? Can we have questions right now? Or is that okay? Or do we wait till Henry finishes? No questions? Nope. Okay, well, Henry, if you wanted to keep going.
I don't have a lot more. This coming Friday is a furlough day for city staff as part of that 5% cut, 19 days that we're not working. And it's combined with the holiday, I believe it's President's Day on Monday for a 4-day weekend. The library will be closed on Saturday. So staff is looking forward to that. We've all been working pretty hard. A couple of people have had vacations. So the staff, I think, have fell into a good rhythm with the curbside. We've been giving away Valentine's take and make bags rather than make and take. Now you take, then you make, and they have all the things to make your own Valentine doilies, paper, that type of stuff in advance of Valentine's Day, which is coming up. And that's another type of giveaway thing. While we were open briefly at the mall, we were giving away bags of weeded materials that were in really good shape that people could just take them away rather than them being deaccessioned. So we're continually trying to kind of add additional services. Oddly enough, just the books in the window, every day I see people looking at the browsing books by the pickup area and requesting specific items to be added to their bag, which I think is kind of amazing. So window shopping is alive and well in the pandemic. But yeah, shout out to the staff for the long haul. It's coming up on a year now almost. So
March 17th, St. Patrick's
Yeah.
Day. There is one thing I wanted to add, and this, I think one of our Board of Trustees members brought up the concern about Spanish speaking and the children and some of the areas. And the city has overall a huge canal kind of surge plan that they've been putting together. And that's how it started. And what it's turned into is incredible integrated program with a lot of our partners. But I just want to briefly just touch on one thing that is a program that has been going on for months now, and I probably mentioned it before, but just in case. We have partnered with Marin County of Education to offer the learning hubs at 2 of the community centers. One is the Albert J. Borough Community Center, and the other one is the San Rafael Community Center. We have partnered with MCOE, who is funding the whole thing. So they're funding the providers who are the instructors, and our 2 partners are Catholic Charities and the YMCA, respectively, that are providing the instructors on site. And then we provide the facility attendants, custodial staff, and obviously the supervision of the building. And we've been doing that since September. Well, we just talked to them last week, and it will continue to go through March. So the amount of children, elementary school all the way through middle school and high school, are the groups that we've been serving, and they do come from the San Rafael City School District. So, and some of them are being bused from Benicia Valley all the way down to San Rafael's Community Center. So I'm just providing that to you as well. So beyond what the library is providing, which is an incredible amount of services and programs, the city in general has really pivoted, to use your phrase, and is providing all kinds of programs that we normally are not involved in.
That's wonderful. I'm really glad to hear, because yeah, 2-3 hours a day, 4 days a week, it's not enough. And if there's any way that in addition we could get books to the kids, maybe while they're at the hubs, that they could take home and read. I don't know if that's another point, that we could bring some of the books that they could then select.
Yes, the county actually mentioned in I heard today that they have extra giveaway books that they'll be giving to us that we could provide. We had provided some during the food giveaways over the summer that were very popular. So anything we could do to kind of support the learning hubs, we'd be extremely interested.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of coordinated efforts that are going on at the Albert J. Borough Community Center right now. We have one of our coordinators, a recreation coordinator, is coordinating all the food distribution and making sure, and is kind of playing the coordinator, the liaison with all the different providers to make sure that's happening. So that is actually happening on site. As well as we're bringing testing in now into the parking lot area, because once again, even though they have it at the Canal Alliance facility, they're bringing in as many areas that they can. So the amount of services that's coming out of that building to really kind of level the field of what's going on in the canal area is amazing amount of resources. And once again, like I said, recreation staff don't usually distribute food or handle, with vaccines, but that is a perfect example of how a joint facility can really work, because it is one of our few that is a library and a community center with staff doing both of those things really well.
Thank you for the update. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Susan. And I don't know if it's on the work plan, because I don't recall, but if not, or maybe I'll motion next time, but it'd be great to have an update once, at the end of the school year or something about those hubs. So I think that'd be interesting. Henry, you have anything else or on your agenda, on your time?
That's it for my report for this meeting.
Thanks, Henry. So the next meeting is March 9th, and we have a future agenda topic, which is the master fee schedule update. So unless you have any other questions, we will adjourn at 7:30 on the dot. Thanks all.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Jinder. Shout out to Jinder.